Hi, and welcome to another edition of In the Public Interest. I'm Jim Suriani, your host for this weekend of wonderful information about all the various things that are going on throughout Santa Barbara County, on the Central Coast as well. We have a very exciting show this week. On this week's show, we are going to learn about a technology called the hearing loop, and you may have heard of this technology. With me today is local audiologist Donna Gilmartin. She's one of the co-creators of an organization called Let's Loop Santa Barbara. It's a campaign, actually, a nonprofit organization whose goal is to bring public awareness and education about the benefits of hearing loops to the Tri-Counties. And we'll learn all about what hearing loops are and how they work and how the public can benefit from them. Welcome to In the Public Interest. Donna, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you. First off, the history of this organization. How did this all come about to begin with, the whole Hearing Loop campaign?
Well, it's kind of a sweet story. A client of mine, Claudia Hertzkog, she's 87. She is completely deaf on one side and has a cochlear implant in that ear and severely hearing impaired on the other side, and I help her with the hearing aid. And she's the past president of our local chapter of the Hearing Loss Association of America. And so we've been friends, and I advocate for her organization. And one day she said to me, "I have a dream, Donna." I said, "Claudia, what's your dream?" "To see Santa Barbara looped." Well,
we'll all get looped.
Yeah, it started with Claudia, let's loop Santa Barbara. And I knew exactly what she meant because I was an audiologist at the House Ear Clinic in 1988 when Dr. Howard House had a very similar dream. He wanted a demonstration room at the House Ear Clinic in LA that had a listening system with a T-coil in it so that he can show all of his patients. So I knew what we needed was a looper if we were going to do this. And we found Tom. Claudia gave him 30 years of information that she'd collected on how this all works. And Tom was off and running. And then we were amazingly successful. We donated a loop to the Art Museum. A private donor helped with the Campbell Hall. But we needed more awareness. You know, the women of and the men of this nonprofit, the Hearing Loss Association, were doing an incredible job on their own. But then it was suggested that Joe Black get involved. Joe Black is the director of the Independent Living Resource Center. She's also a friend of Claudia's and a neighbor, and she's a wonderful grant writer. So with the help of Joe Black, we now officially have a campaign that's supported by a grant, and we're here on the radio to get more awareness.
Absolutely, which is why this show exists to begin with, is to help get the word out about organizations such as yours. And it's it's the Let's Loop Santa Barbara campaign. Now, what is a hearing loop exactly?
Okay, so a hearing loop is a listening system that wirelessly transfers pure, clean sound without background noise directly to the T-coil of a hearing aid or a headset. And it's pretty simple technology. It's not new. A small electromagnetic transmitter gets attached to any PA system, and a copper cable gets laid along the perimeter of a room, creating the loop.
Oh, I see. So as long as the person has the T-coil hearing aid.
Right. The hearing loop, easy way to look at it, the hearing loop itself is the transmitting end, and the receiving end is in a hearing aid, and it's a copper coil. The T-coil.
And yes, tell us what the T-coil is.
Right. The T-coil is a copper coil that sits in a hearing aid, and it can be turned on to pick up the electromagnetic current. This was originally used in hearing aids and dates back to the advent of hearing aids so that a person could hear on the phone.
Okay.
The landline phones use electromagnetic current to transfer sound, and if you hold a phone up to a hearing aid, particularly in the old days before digital technology, it would feedback or squeal. Everybody here knows what feedback is.
Right.
And so you would manually flip the switch on the hearing aid to turn off the live mic to eliminate the feedback, and then the sound from the phone could be transferred to the copper coil in the hearing aid, and it worked beautifully.
And so that was originally what it was for the phones.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how is the hearing loop different from other listening systems also used, primarily FM or infrared?
Well, the FM and the infrared systems, you have to have a headset receiver. So movie theaters and venues that use FM or infrared, you have to take off your hearing aid and put something around your neck, whether it's
Oh,
headphones,
okay.
and they break and they get dirty. There's
And
also
germs
yes,
from other
there's
people using them.
often there's just little sections of a theater, so it's not as inconspicuous. You have to sit in a particular section.
So with the hearing loop, they don't have to sit in a special section. They can sit anywhere in the
No,
theater.
anywhere. It's very discreet. Again, the copper coil is laid in the perimeter of the room, and all you have to do is sit anywhere within that perimeter and push the button on your hearing aid, and you get the sound directly from the PA system.
Wow, that's wonderful technology. In case you're just joining us, you're listening to In the Public Interest. My guest this week is Donna Faith Gilmartin. She's an audiologist, and she's with an organization called Let's Loop Santa Barbara campaign. They're trying to get the word out about the hearing loop technology that's out there. Now, I understand there's a connection with the film festival. I understand a couple of venues have this technology. Why the film festival?
Well, it started last year when Tom learned how to install the loops, and he went after the movie theaters, but we quickly learned they weren't interested, and the film festival was starting.
Really? That's
No,
too
the
bad.
movie theaters had the FM, they had the
Oh,
infrared.
okay.
They felt that they, had satisfied the laws, and if Joe Black was here, she could get more into that, but next time. But I told Tom, don't worry about it. What really the beauty of Santa Barbara is all the live performances that happen, and this technology really shines with that type of technology. I mean, with a live performance. And we had one of the members in the Hearing Loss Association chapter was a docent at the art museum, and she said that the acoustics in that room are horrible, and I knew they used the room for the film festival, so I said, let's go there. Let's see if we can start with that.
Oh, okay. So you started with the film festival, and it's kind of timely that we're here today because the film festival is starting this week and goes through the 9th of February. So the hearing loop, then, as far as the film festival is concerned, it's in the Libero and what the other space?
The Libero and the Mary Craig Auditorium at the Art Museum.
The Art Museum.
And
right.
we went after, the beauty of the film festival is everyone loves the film festival here in Santa Barbara.
Sure.
And our target market is anyone from 17 to 104.
So just a small niche.
Right.
17 to 104.
Hearing
That's a
loss,
huge...
unfortunately, is happening to
affects everybody.
more and more people, younger people. And our local audience does not want to settle for being left at home. They want to go to the theater, and they want to hear and, more importantly, understand what's being said.
Right,
So,
sure. So does the system, when they're using their hearing aid, I guess they push like a button on their own personal device? Is that?
That's correct.
And so does it kind of cancel out all the ambient noise?
That's the beauty of it. It really improves what I refer to as the signal-to-noise ratio.
Okay.
The microphones on a hearing aid really are only operating within about a 6-foot radius. You think in terms of a handshake away from a person.
Oh, sure.
If the microphones were strong enough to reach something 12 feet away or 30 feet away, you think of being in a church environment or an large auditorium, they would be picking pick up the noises, sneezing, papers rustling, the person next to you. And so that background noise winds up drowning out what you want to hear. So with this system, it goes directly from the sound source via the copper coil.
Which is around the room of the auditorium or whatever the venue is.
The copper, there's a copper wire, and then the receiving end in the hearing aid is the copper coil. And so you can literally turn off or turn down the microphone of the hearing device and just pipe in what's coming directly from the PA system.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Now, why would you use... no, this is not a radio frequency that you're using, or is
no,
it?
but we're using radio to get the word out, which is not always traditional.
I see what you're saying. Right. Okay. So I guess the question then is why use radio when traditionally people with hearing loss complain they can't hear the radio?
Well, it's because of what we mentioned before. It's not just older people who are suffering the consequences, and the baby boomers are still listening to the radio.
Sure.
They haven't stopped. All they do is crank it up and turn it louder. Our target market is very broad, but our niche market is really the baby boomer woman. She has noise-induced hearing loss from her rock and roll days. Her husband's hearing is worse than hers, but he's still in denial or too vain to talk about it until she does. And plus, she has a parent or an in-law who would love to give the film festival a shot if only they could sit wherever they wanted in the theater and understand what was being said.
Or in some cases, maybe not so much with the film festival, but with other venues, other theaters, live theater performances, they have to set aside a certain performance for for the hearing impaired because, of whatever technology they may or may not have.
Right. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with this campaign is get
People
people thinking out of the box,
Sure.
and there's enough need. And again, the technology is not expensive. The expensive part is already in the hearing device. People invest a lot of money in their hearing aids. And the beauty of it is that the technology is primarily already there. The big expense is already there.
It's just a matter of installing the couple.
Getting the external component
Right.
that can transfer the sound.
Wow. Okay. Well, that sounds very doable. And again, if you're just joining us, you're listening to In the Public Interest. And my guest this week is Donna Gilmartin. She is an audiologist, and she's with an organization called Let's Loop Santa Barbara. It's a campaign that they're trying to get the awareness and get the word out about the hearing loop technology and to get it used in more venues. If you'd like to learn more about Loop Santa Barbara, you can click on their website, loopsantabarbara.org. Again, that's loopsantabarbara.org. Or if you would like to find more information on T-coils and hearing health information as well, you can go to Donna's website, which is donnafaithaudiology.com. And again, that's donnafaithaudiology.com. And we'll get that information out in case you might have missed it. So then, Donna, let me ask you this then. Why don't more people with hearing loss know about this technology to begin with?
Well, again, one problem I saw happen with back in '88 when Howard House wanted everyone to know about this wonderful technology is that once they left the House Ear Clinic, there was nobody had the external transmitting part, none of the theaters, none of the churches, and I had no one to refer to recommend the installation. So now the word is out there. We have installers involved. And the other problem that still comes up, unfortunately, is that the T-coil did get left out. In the 80s and the 90s, the hearing aid manufacturers, there was a race to have the invisible hearing aid.
Right.
Again, they were trying to please what they termed the American market. Most hearing aids are made in Germany and Switzerland. And they were this time, instead of targeting severe hearing impaired population, they were going for what they called the American market, which I know is the baby boomers.
Okay.
And the idea was to have an invisible hearing aid. So unfortunately, there are a lot of digital instruments out there now that are too small in the way because the coil is not expensive, but it is large. So another important part of this campaign is to make people realize that there is now the first made for baby boomer hearing aid with a coil in it that is very appealing aesthetically. You really can't see it.
Oh, okay.
So you don't have to compromise anymore.
Oh, okay. So they're going back to using the T-coil.
Going back to using this very effective technology.
Okay,
yes.
but then still making it so that it's small enough and people don't. It's not a huge instrument, if you will, that's
right
visible.
Right. And that leads us to the next question.
Yes, and in fact, I was going to ask you. I understand a lot of cities, especially in Europe, have the loop systems. Why are there so many loops, for example, in London?
Well, my theory is that it's because of the socialized medicine
For those governments.
I worked for a short time in Australia and in London, and because the government pays for the hearing aids, everybody essentially gets the same one, and it is the larger not necessarily as appealing looking hearing device. That wasn't their
Right.
motivation to have it be invisible. Their motivation was for it to be effective. The government was paying for it, and they all have a T-coil. And the cities in London, Heathrow Airport is looped. You can go in a taxi cab or sit at a
So
bank.
city taxi cabs in London are looped, like within the inside
Yes, so
the vehicle. Wow.
the car is traditionally a difficult listening situation because you can't lip read, and so you think of a
course.
taxi cab driver facing forward, and you're in the back, and so now you can sit in the back of the cab. There's a copper coil going along the perimeter of the ceiling of the
Taxi cab.
taxi cab, and you
Oh.
can again, it gets piped directly to you. Push. You do have to activate your T-coil in your hearing aid, but that's a subtle push of a button.
Wow.
So it's really
Okay.
cool. And bank tellers do that. Hotel concierge desks are looped. I've heard that you go to the Vatican and you can turn on your T-coil and hear a tour in any different several different languages if you'd like
Oh.
to do that.
So not only can you hear, but you can hear in your own language.
That's right. You can.
Wow.
And so our campaign is to catch up. Imagine that.
Yes.
We're always so ahead in this country, but in this little niche of a technology, we want to catch up with London and some other places. Even New York and LA don't have the.
I was going to ask. Not
No,
even
I
LA or
think
New
Santa
York.
Barbara right now is ahead of even New York and LA when it comes to this.
Do you know of other cities in the U.S. that might have it?
Well, I do know that the Philharmonic. There was an article in the New York Times about a deaf person hearing for the first time, listening to the Philharmonic in New York, and that got reprinted in Santa Barbara, and it was sort of. We've been trying to ride off that initial interest, and that was about a year and a half ago. So it's starting to get noticed in big places like New York, but it's really Wisconsin. This started with a national campaign with an audiologist who was passionate like myself, and a husband who gave up his corporate job to learn how to install loops. And so she's my mentor, is Juliet Sturkins, and they have a national campaign called Let's Loop America, I believe is what it is.
Oh, okay. So they have there is a national
Yes,
campaign
Get in
as
the
well.
Hearing Loop is our national campaign.
Oh, okay, great. That's wonderful. Now, of course, we were talking about movie theaters, and they have their own systems. A lot of the live venues, such as like we talked about the Libero, they have this for when you have amplified performances. But what about if there is a performance that is not amplified? A lot of times, for example, typically Shakespeare plays sometimes are not done on amplified decks. I mean, sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. But sometimes people prefer to do their performance without amplification for whatever reason.
Right.
Does it work with that?
Well, no, that makes it tricky.
Okay.
And that's, but temporary loops can be laid, inexpensive.
So a temporary one could be brought in.
Yes, a temporary loop can be brought in. Inexpensive amplifying systems can be incorporated into that. So it can be done. Where it's hard is something like a restaurant. When you think in terms of one-on-one, where you wouldn't necessarily have the use of a microphone, an external microphone. There's it's limited in that department.
Sure.
But
yeah.
if you're sitting in a room, or even at your chair in front of your TV, the transmitter can go to the back of the TV, and the loop be as small as the chair you like to sit in, and you can receive it that way.
Oh, so it's available then for consumer?
Absolutely, yeah. For under $500, you could have your own living room looped.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not bad at all. I mean,
No.
for $500, you can spend more than that on just your TV, just the TV set alone.
Right.
So that's not bad. As you said, there are these portable ones. So maybe it's a matter of letting venues know that even if they don't have it installed in their venue, and if they don't use amplified equipment for whatever reason, then there are temporary ones that can be brought in. How would they go about doing that?
I would get in contact with loopsantabarbara.org, and we can put you in touch with installers, and you could get a quote. The other thing I might mention is that Campbell Hall is looped. Now, we haven't talked about
yes.
Campbell Hall.
How did that come about?
I'm so proud of Campbell Hall because it was a private donor. Someone came to the chapter meeting where we were educating folks and letting them demonstrate the technology in the meeting room at the library at Wood Glen Hall. And he was so impressed with what he heard and how he heard it in our meeting room that his foundation donated $10,000 to Loop Campbell Hall.
Wow.
That was our wonderful Arthur Roop. We give thanks to him.
Now, is it easier to loop a facility? Let's say a facility is thinking about renovating. Obviously, maybe it's easier to do it at that point, but if they're not thinking about renovating their space anytime soon, is it pretty easy to still install it in that situation?
Yes, it depends on the level of metal in the room is what it comes down to. So the first thing that is assessed is that, for instance, in Mary Craig Auditorium, they were not. They could not get away with a perimeter loop. They had to loop every other row to create enough of electromagnetic current that there was no dead spots. And so that makes it a little more time-consuming, a little bit more expensive. But again, the basic components, the transmitter, the copper wire, they're not expensive. So some of the labor, it depends on the size of the room and whether they can simply go into the ceiling and create a perimeter, or down on the floor. Then they'll put it under the carpet. Sometimes churches will put them in the basement, up in the ceiling of the basement, and you can actually tap into the current
coming up through the
from
floor.
both the chapel upstairs and, let's say, the dining hall downstairs. So that's, it does depend on some of the layout of the room you want to.
Sure, and how it's, now, as you mentioned, the metal, what if they're using metal decor or something?
You think about the size of Campbell Hall and the fact that you can sit anywhere. I think it's 18,000 seats, could it be? I don't know how big it is, where that number came from, but
it's a pretty big space.
Now, what they had to do there that did cost more money was they had to grind a groove in the concrete to lay the copper wire so nobody would trip, and so that cost a pretty penny. But the college was so committed at that point that UCSB matched the private donation, and the job got done.
That's great. Donna, we're just about out of time, but before we go, if you could just give us all the information, how people can find out more, all the 411.
Great. Okay. Well, for information on the T-coil or your hearing health, I think I'll refer to the donnafaithaudiology.com. I can help out by letting you know, first of all, if you have a T-coil in your hearing aid, because one of the beauties of it is there's not one particular product. You don't necessarily have to buy a new instrument. So the first thing I could do is help you determine whether you have a T-coil and whether it's on. And help you turn it on if it's not on already.
Okay.
And then for more information in general about the loop and for getting involved, it would be wonderful to have more people advocating on our behalf. Then I'm going to refer you to the loopsantabarbara.org, and that will also show you a list of all the places that have successfully been looped in Santa Barbara.
Oh, good. Well, hopefully one venue at a time we can get all of Santa Barbara County looped.
Absolutely.
Looped in a good way.
That's right.
Well, Donna, thank you so much for joining me today on the show, and thank you for all this information. It's wonderful to learn something new about different technologies and such. And so thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And you've been listening to In the Public Interest. And again, if you'd like more information about Let's Loop Santa Barbara campaign, visit loopsantabarbara.org. And again, for more information on T-coils and hearing health, click on Donna's website, donnafaithaudiology.com. And if you'd like to be a guest on In the Public Interest, shoot me an email to jimontheair@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye, everybody. In the Public Interest is a presentation of Rincon Broadcasting, LLC, and was recorded earlier for presentation at this time.